Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about one of those things that honestly, Brian and I really don't even want to talk about. It just brings up too many bad memories from the last couple of years. It's white mold. It's a tough disease. It's one of the toughest ones we face. We'll talk about what you can do to reduce your white mold pressure.
We're also going to talk about one of the most commonly asked questions we get. What planting population should I use in corn? Oh, and by the way, what variety should I plant? So we'll answer those questions on today's show.
We've also got a tough to control weed of the week once again. An iron talk coming up a little later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
The Grain Depth Guard from Farm Shop MFG has helped farmers keep their bushels safe from spoilage and shrinkage loss in bins all across the country. And this low-cost solution just became even more affordable. Farm Shop MFG is offering a $100 factory rebate on all Grain Temp Guard bin monitoring systems. This offer is available for a limited time only, so take advantage of this program now to upgrade your bins and protect your crop investments. For more information, visit farmshopmfg.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to answer a question we've gotten from a lot of non-farmers all through 2019. That is, what are farmers going to do with all this ground that was flooded so they can actually raise a decent crop in 2020? The first thing farmers have to look at is this a long-term thing or a short-term thing? Can the river take my ground again? So for example, we have some river bottom ground where the river flooded. It came out of its banks, and that happens maybe once every 10 years. So if that's the case, that's totally different than if this wasn't a river issue. This was just, hey, I had a bunch of rain and it just kept raining all through the planting season, so I had delayed planting. That's not a long-term thing.
So water got out on the ground either way in either of those two situations. And if the water stayed on the ground for a long time, what we're concerned about is, you know what, some of our beneficial soil microbes may have died in the process. So we want to try to replenish that as quickly as we can. Farmers can apply some of the beneficial microbes that they need with products in furrow or even broadcast. The other way farmers can put more beneficial microbes out is by putting out manure or compost. That may be some ways that they jumpstart the whole process.
One of the reasons these microbes are so important is they can actually turn nutrients in the soil into a form that is available for use by the plant that year. And in some cases, they'll even bring those nutrients right to the plant. And you might say, well, why would the microbes do all that for the plant? Well, the reason why is the healthier the plant, the more the plant will kick out sugars for those microbes, and the microbes eat the sugars. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and this can happen if there are a lot of these microbes in the soil, but again, many died because of lack of oxygen due to the flooding.
The other thing that farmers will do is make sure they have available nutrition for their crops. So in the process of these microbes getting going again, farmers are going to try to put fertility closer to the row if they can. So that means either in furrow or more likely in a 2x2 type scenario or strip till. So they've got all the nutrients that plant needs in close proximity to where they're putting the seed, so they know for sure the root system will find it.
The number one thing that a lot of people are talking about too with these acres where they weren't able to plant because it was too wet is putting more drain tile in the ground. And we talk often here about drain tile. For the farmer, the big thing is there will now be more oxygen in the top 2 or 3 feet in the soil. So you end up with a healthier soil, and long term there's a lot less water that goes downstream because we raise a lot more crop.
Well, really the important thing here, Brian, is that farmers get a crop growing in the field again. Once we have that living host out in the field for all the microbes to start working around, we can start turning that soil around and making the field productive again.
Well, one of the things any farmer can do if he wants his ground to be very productive is control the weeds. Can you identify this week's Weed of the Week?
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
It starts with genetics, what you're made of. It takes agronomy. It's local. It's knowing your land and having the tools to put the right product in the right place. It's built on service with trust, grit, and determination. Because it turns out, what it takes to make the best product is a lot like what it takes to make a farmer. Golden Harvest, rooted in genetics, agronomy, and service.
Tired of that old warped poly boom ruining your spray applications? Express Boom from Hypro is a fully assembled stainless steel boom that ensures an even application of chemicals every time. Don't wait another season, upgrade today. Hypro, helping you spray better.
Challenging field conditions often make harvest difficult. Can your corn head handle it? The GTS X10 corn head from Agra US is a rugged, cost-effective alternative to heavier, more traditional heads. Constructed of durable yet lightweight aluminum, the X10 puts less strain on your combine without losing harvest effectiveness. And it is 40% lighter than traditional heads, reducing field compaction in those less than ideal conditions. For more information, give us a call at 8334-AGRA US.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for spring field conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
Is excess moisture hurting your yield? I'm Darren Hefty. Installing drain tile is the best way to start improving your ground and your bottom line. And we want to give you the knowledge to do it right from start to finish. Join my brother Brian and me at a free Ag PhD tiling clinic Tuesday, January 28th. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we'll share what you need to know to improve drainage and save money on your farm for decades to come. So join us at the Ag PhD tiling clinic Tuesday, January 28th near Baltic, South Dakota. Sign up at agphd.com.
Sclerotinia white mold is one of the worst diseases you can get. It affects soybeans and a number of other crops. We're going to talk today about how to solve this problem, but let me start by saying this. We had the worst white mold issue that I've ever seen in my entire life, and I want to explain one of the reasons I believe it was so bad this particular year. The humidity in my state, in my area, and this is South Dakota, where you usually think about this as being very dry. Well, the humidity in July was 80+%. Guess what it was in August? It was 80% or more again on average. So you start thinking about 2 straight months where you've got an average humidity of 80% or more. That's a lot. It's no wonder we had a disaster this year.
Well, with any disease, you have to look at the disease triangle. You have to have the right environmental conditions, you have to have the pathogen present, and you have to have a susceptible host. Where many farmers get caught up is being concerned about the susceptible host and thinking, well, I need to change which variety I plant. Whether it's sunflowers or soybeans or edible beans, there are always varieties that are a little more tolerant to diseases like white mold than others. And again, this was the case in 2019. There are some that were more tolerant, but I didn't find a single variety in any of the soybeans I looked at, from group 00s at the Canadian border to group 5s down in the deep south, that were resistant. Now, granted, we don't get much white mold once we get past about a group 3 because those beans are raised too far south. There's too much heat for the white mold to really be a problem. But when we look at the earlier maturing beans, yes, there's some that fought the white mold off a little better than others, but there certainly weren't any totally resistant.
White mold starts as mushrooms. So if you think about this just logically, when do you have the best conditions for mushrooms? It's when there's a lot of moisture, a lot of humidity, and also some shade. So what'll happen is these mushrooms will get started, They will shoot spores out, and where they infect the soybean plant is where soybean flowers have dried up. See, you're not going to find white mold early in the season, but once the plant starts flowering, now when any of those flowers disappear, that usually is the best infection point for this Sclerotinia white mold.
And there's really part of the big problem with white mold, Brian, is it can pop up for multiple weeks through the season. In fact, multiple months through the season. Once that soybean has reached the reproductive stages, really from then until senescence, you could have more white mold infecting that plant. Oftentimes we see farmers turning to 1 or 2 applications of foliar fungicides, which can certainly help and be a part of the solution, but they can't be expected to protect that plant for a 2-month time period or maybe more.
All right, so let's talk about the best control strategies. Number 1 is stay away from soybeans or any host crop to white mold for 2 or 3 years. We've seen this a lot on our farm where we have more corn history in the background on certain fields. We have a lot less white mold. Next thing is take a look at your soil pH and overall manganese availability. Manganese is a big key in terms of white mold tolerance for any plant, any crop. Manganese is more available when the pH is lower. So you want to get your pH down into the 6s, and then the next thing is just have a lot of manganese out there. Soil test your manganese levels, and if your manganese levels aren't high, get them to high, and you'll usually find things work better. I would also say drain tile is a big key here, because if your soil is sitting overly saturated for very long, well, obviously those are good conditions for mushroom growth. What we want is for our soil to be healthy, we want our plants to be healthy, and good drainage is absolutely a key. So those are some of the things you can do before the start of the season.
Then we start looking at some other solutions. One that really doesn't cost much is heads-up seed treatment. That's been one that's really helped us on our farm. We've seen other farmers as well saying, you know what, it didn't totally wipe out the white mold, but it definitely reduced the pressure when we put the heads up on. That's something I would recommend. Another thing would be taking a look at Contans. That's a soil-applied product that's a biological that eats the sclerotia. Now, the more time you'd have the Contans out there, the better. So ideally, you'd put that out in the fall after soybean harvest and give the product more time to get working. But if you haven't done it yet, you could still do it before planting this year. Get it out soil applied. It doesn't hurt your seed at all, but it will start impacting that sclerotia in the field.
Darren mentioned fungicides earlier, and we'll talk more about that, but before you ever spray a fungicide, our suggestion is go out there with about 6 ounces of Cobra or the generic version of that. It only costs around $5. Do that in the middle of June, right before flowering. Cobra has been shown to be just as good or almost as good as the very best fungicides on white mold. So start with Cobra in soybeans right before flowering.
When it comes to fungicides, Endura has been the best product. There are some newer ones that are making some claims, like Approach and Miravis Neo, and we've seen some mixed results there. I guess we'll continue to do more testing. What we've found is you can go a little bit cheaper and start using combinations of Topsin and Domark, get multiple modes of action for less money.
All right, I'm going to simplify it even more than that. Endura is absolutely the best. Then you got Proline. Then you've got a combination of Domark and Topsin. If you want something else, Approach and Miravis Neo, I don't think are even as good as the combination of Domark and Topsin, but you can try that on your farm. In terms of timing, that's the big key here. You have to start early. Starting earlier usually means better control, even with an inferior product. So start right at R1 at first flower, and then you want to follow up about every 2 to 3 weeks after that.
And of course, get great coverage, like with the Hypro 3D nozzles. You've got to coat everything if you want to protect it.
Well, protecting your yields doesn't just mean having great fungicide activity, it also means having great weed control. We'll talk about our Weed of the Week coming up later in the show.
Every day, we rise. We face the pressure, the uncertainty. Sometimes the decisions we make seem as tough as the work we do. Let the Acceleron portfolio lighten your load with a powerful array of seed treatments, fungicides, insecticides, nematicides, and bioenhancers offered in select combinations to give you coverage with one simple decision. Looking for a little peace of mind? We're on it.
Why do I farm? It's just something I've always wanted to do. Something I've known since I was my daughter's age. When you farm, you have a responsibility to keep it growing. To look at a freshly planted field, a newborn calf, even your bottom line, then ask yourself, how do I help this grow? How can I make it even more productive? I ask myself these questions every day because no matter what I'm doing, I'm still a farmer.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
I need results, so I choose the one system I trust to take weeds down and keep them down on even my toughest acres with the kind of yield potential that helps keep me in the black to deliver my kind of results season after season. I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system. I choose results.
It's been remarkable what we've seen out of the varieties of Extend soybeans. The yield has come through for us.
We had the best soybean crop we've ever had. The yields were there.
With the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the yield boost and the lack of weed pressure really helps our bottom line.
The technology has exceeded my expectations. It's one thing that the industry has been looking for years.
There's nothing like harvesting record crops.
How much does your crop residue cost you? Over time, residue accumulates in your fields, building excess carbon levels and tying up your plant available nitrogen. Residue also traps P, K, and microbes and can take years to naturally become available to your crops. This is because soil lacks the diverse microbial life needed to break it all down. With Decomp, you can naturally restore life to your soil and allow the release of valuable crop fertility. Learn more about Decomp at eggbio.solutions.
Two of my favorite questions I get every year, many times, are number one, hey, what's the right planting population? And number two, what's the best hybrid to plant on my farm? Darren, what do you think? How do you answer those questions?
Well, there's no right answer, Brian, because we don't know what the year is going to be. I can answer it in hindsight for 2020 and look back at our farm and say, well, hey, you know what? These hybrids perform better, and also this planting population worked best for each one on this season. But you just don't know what you're going to get for a season. Are you going to get lots of sunlight and lots of heat? Are there going to be lots of cloudy days like this year and cooler weather? That's going to play a big factor into what works. And we see this by just looking at the yield trials. Hybrids that win one year, oftentimes the next year, they may be middle of the pack. Who knows? It really varies. That's why it's tough to pick one hybrid to plant for your whole farm, and very important that you pick multiple hybrids to plant. And we've got a lot of other things to add to the diversity to help your operation.
So a lot of times what we talk about, and we try to do this on our farm, we're going to plant a wide range of maturity, and we're going to plant those at varying populations. So let's start with this maturity thing. What I usually plan for is, hey, it's probably going to take 3 to maybe even 4 weeks to get our corn planted. Now, if we were to just go straight through, would it take that? No way. Easily we could have our corn planted in a week. But it just doesn't work that way, because either the field's not ready, the field's too wet, or it's raining, or there's a breakdown, or something else came up that was too important and we said, okay, we got to stop the planter for a day. There are all these things that happen. Well, if I know that on average my planting date's going to vary by 3 to possibly 4 weeks, why would I not have my maturity varying as well? So we're going to start with maybe 105 to 110 day. We're going to finish with a 95 to 100 day, something like that. So we're varying our maturity 10 to 15 days. That's a big deal. Also, you might say, well, hey, what do you do for your planter when you can vary the population? Do you change it as you go through the field? We absolutely do. In our very light ground that's non-irrigated, we're always going to plant lower populations. And in our heavy ground, where we have lots of moisture there all the time, we're going to plant higher populations. But that said, we're going to vary both of those things quite a bit just from field to field, variety to variety, year to year. We want to change up our populations a little bit because, to Darren's point, we just don't know what the year is going to bring, and we want to spread our risk.
These are great discussions to be having with your seed supplier and also with your agronomist. So get your team together for your farm. Talk about each field, talk about each hybrid, what you're going to do for populations, how you're going to vary things throughout the farm to spread your risk. Because again, you just don't know what you're going to get for a year next year. So make sure that your bases are covered on all fronts.
So the reason why we're talking about this today is chances are you have bought your seed now and you have made a plan for, okay, I'm going to plant at whatever 32,000 population, and you might have said that for the entire farm, and you might have, let's say, 50% of your farm's acres in one variety. We typically are not going to recommend that to you. So on our farm, I really don't want more than maybe 15 or 20% into any one hybrid. I'm that concerned about it. I just remember, even as a very young agronomist, this just sticks with me ever since this happened. The #1 variety in our area, it was winning every single trial, it seemed like. Well, the next year, a lot of guys planted almost the entire farm to that variety. And guess what happened to it? It was a disaster. It had silk balling. I've never seen that before or after, but that variety, for some reason that year, the silks didn't come out. So it didn't properly pollinate, and the yields were down 50 to 80 bushels. So the farmers that planted predominantly that variety, it really hurt them economically. It hurt them so bad that in some cases they weren't farming anymore. And I just looked at that as, I want to make sure that I'm farming the next year. So I want to spread my risk because I just don't know what's going to happen with that variety. And I think this problem is even worse today because, let's face it, we don't have 5, 8 years that a variety is going to be around. It's usually here for a year or two. That's it. We don't have all this history behind it in wet years, dry years, cold years, hot years. So spread the risk.
Well, spreading your risk is very important on your farm, but one thing that you have to be 100% the same on is wiping weeds out of your fields, like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you what'll stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
One of the fun things when we do our Weed of the Week each week is occasionally we'll get some people writing us or calling us saying, hey, that's not really a weed. Well, it's white clover today, and could white clover be a beneficial plant on your farm? Yes, it's certainly possible, but any plant that is out of place, that's called a weed. So if white clover is where you don't want it, it is a weed. We're going to talk about how to stop it.
Well, you know, we got another funny comment from one of our viewers who said, white clover just absolutely took the area over, so he gave up on growing grass and just went to white clover. This can happen in your yard really easily. White clover will spread. It's a perennial. The patch is just going to keep getting bigger, so you've got to get after it soon if you want to get it under control.
All right, usually we don't have a big problem with this out in crop fields. Generally speaking, crop canopy is going to take it out eventually. But if you want to stop it right away, you can certainly use glyphosate. That'll do it. But when we talk about lawns, obviously you're not going to use glyphosate or Roundup out there because you kill the entire lawn. So usually people go with 2,4-D and just use a very high rate.
Well, the other thing is multiple applications throughout the season. So early spring, possibly one in the middle of the summer, and then one again in the fall. You have to be really cautious when you're using 2,4-D in the middle of the summer because it's hot and it can get a little bit volatile. So be really cautious about when you're doing that. But it is an effective method to do it. It may take you a couple of years to get this under control, but it's certainly something that can be stopped.
In addition to 2,4-D, I'm going to give you 2 other suggestions for your lawns that may not be perfect, but again, will certainly help. 1 is Drive, and 2 would be Tenacity. So Tenacity, I think, is an interesting product because it's basically the same thing as Callisto that we use in corn. And you might say, well, wait a second, I thought Callisto had some grass activity. It does have some, but not enough to kill the perennial grass of your lawn.
Well, and Drive is quinclorac that can also be used in multiple crops. So there are a couple of well-known active ingredients that can have some impact for you in cleaning up our weed of the week, white clover.
Well, that's it for this week's weed, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
It's no secret that Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate with your schedule. Field conditions in recent years kept many from timely planting and fertilizing, and when you can't get your fertilizer applied, you lose thousands of dollars in yield potential. If you need flexibility in your fertility application timing, you need a drop tube system from C&R Supply. C&R drop tubes allow you to apply liquid nitrogen in season and place it exactly where your crop needs it. To learn more about low-cost C&R drop tube solutions, visit crsupply.com.
Find love, and then give it all away. Find love, then give it all away.
Tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
Introducing the all-new Diamant Cornhead from Capello, USA. With a revolutionary design highly innovative for its class, we have painstakingly designed every component down to the smallest detail to maximize your harvest efficiency. This gives you unprecedented standards in operation and performance. To get a hands-on look at this beast featuring our new gray poly design, join us at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky, February 12th through the 15th. Capello, wherever you are, we are.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Why do I farm? It's just something I've always wanted to do. Something I've known since I was my daughter's age. When you farm, you have a responsibility to keep it growing. To look at a freshly planted field, a newborn calf, even your bottom line, then ask yourself, how do I help this grow? How can I make it even more productive? I ask myself these questions every day because no matter what I'm doing, I'm still a farmer.
If you don't want to miss a beat this upcoming season, make sure your software is up to date. We'll discuss that in today's Iron Talk. It never fails. I'll be working with a farmer who's trying to plant or trying to spray, and he's having trouble with the computer control system. While it's really no surprise that computers have problems from time to time, many of those problems can be eliminated by keeping software up to date. At least once per year, most of the computer control systems and other software that you use on the farm will need an update. It's up to you to get this done before you start running into problems and losing valuable time in the field. Unfortunately, the updates aren't like those on your phone that just happen automatically overnight. You need to take charge and get this done. Most of the updates now are available online, so you don't have to leave your house or office to get them. However, there still are some companies that want you to come to your dealer in order to update the software. Fortunately, almost all of these updates are free. You just have to take the time to do them now so you don't have problems in the field down the road. Reach out to your equipment and software providers right away so you don't forget. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
That's all the time we've got for today's show, but before we go, if you're looking for more agronomic information, we'd really encourage you to check out the Ag PhD winter workshops we've got coming up this winter. Just go to agphd.com to learn more.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.